Hello minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. My name is Steve Mitchell and I am working on a little kind of a rustic structure here, and it's kind of funny because I never know what I'm going to make a video of or not. Well, sometimes I do, but sometimes they just kind of come out of the woodwork. And this started out as a little doodle probably 3 weeks ago, and I've been kind of playing with it here and there. It's in my sketchbook. I got a little rock study on the bottom part of the page, and I was thinking about little structures that could go in some of my landscape paintings. And so, I put down some simple blocks, perhaps something that would be seen in a landscape from a distance. And the more I got to playing with them, I would come sit down and doodle with it a little bit. I kept getting more and more detailed. I used to love doing this back in the 70s, which is when I was in school, late 70s. Rustic structures, and while I talk, I'm just going to start finalizing this. I like where it's come. This is a Albert Dürer watercolor pencil in sepia, dark sepia. But anyway, back in the 70s, barns and rustic buildings and the like were just really, really popular. I know you can still see a lot of paintings in that genre today, but I mean, they were huge, maybe even a fad back in the 70s. My first watercolor teacher specialized in doing paintings of barns and historic buildings and stuff like that, and I followed suit. I kind of loved it. And I got burned out on them. I mean, I felt like at one point everybody was doing it, and they started to just feel really kind of trite and overdone to me. And I would guess, I was married, had 2 kids by the time I thought, I don't want to do these anymore. Everybody and their brother and sister were doing rustic paintings and drawings of barns, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it today. It's just, as I said, I was burned out on them. Well, for some reason I've just kind of had an itch to do some, but maybe just kind of add a newer touch. I really like the ramshackled ones, and that's what I started doing when I started drawing this. Is I thought, let's do something just very kind of wonky, ramshackle, dilapidated, maybe even has a tiny bit of a storybook aspect to it. And what can I say? It's one of those situations, what goes around comes around. But what I kind of wanted to focus on in this video is just how inventive you can be with these things. If you just get kind of a few basics down in your observation. And I'm going to show you some things here in a minute that'll kind of explain, and maybe if it's something you're interested in, put you on the path. But you can be very inventive with these, meaning you don't necessarily even have to have any reference. These ramshackled little sheds, they might be farm sheds or whatever, you can get away with a lot. It's very forgiving. You can get away with bad perspective. You can get away with boards going this way, boards going that way, and really it's actually kind of fun to figure out how to make them look dilapidated but kind of cool at the same time. Kind of interesting. Here in the South, if you're traveling through the country, you will see these things from time to time. Some of them have become so dilapidated they're not even useful. They're falling. These like roof panels down here in the South, a lot of them are tin roof. They may be twisted and part of the structure is collapsing. So as I started doodling these, I was thinking, okay, we'll just see what we can do here with a little, maybe a 2 to 3 building. Like maybe we have a little spring shed here. Maybe this is a smokehouse and a corn crib, or it could be a chicken coop, one of them. Down here, in some of the poor backcountry farms, they would use whatever they had. I mean, they sometimes didn't even know what they were doing. They would just throw these structures up. So they were not very well built sometimes. That's why they didn't last, or they would patch them up, you know, with boards here and there, which is why you might see boards going this way and then one little patch of kind of wonky boards patched over the area. I kind of drew some of that here. So I thought it would be fun. And I literally got so burned out on these that I don't think I have painted a shed or a barn or a shack like this in at least 30 years. But it's kind of interesting me now, because I got to thinking the other day how fun it can be to be inventive with these things. You know, come up with your own and make them maybe even kind of ridiculous. So I'm just going through here with this dark sepia pencil and putting in these details. Maybe add some tone here and there. Figure out where my boards are, where maybe there's like some holes or missing planks. You know, you can use wide spacing. Some of these boards, especially if they were structures that weren't lived in, they'd have gaps between the boards. Just enough to keep the wind out, I guess. I don't know. I would use different width boards even. Just using a water brush because it's the easiest, quickest way to wet this colored pencil and set it in. Can even pull some out into some tone. You know, and again, it's not to say anything bad about people who like to paint barns or rustic structures. I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I think it's pretty cool. I just got really burned out on it. You know, and at one point I was struggling with the idea of being able to do anything interesting with it. So I got into my commercial art career. You know, I got interested in learning and exploring other mediums. In the 90s, it was acrylic airbrush, which was like really big at the time. Took seminars from professional airbrush artists and really kind of upped my game on that. As the 90s closed out and the 2000s progressed, you know, airbrush started being replaced by digital, especially for technical art, which I did a lot of technical art. We live in a fairly industrial area, so a lot of the marketing, art and design was based around business to business marketing, and a lot of those industries were technical. And it just got to the point where that was easier to do and better done digitally. You know, Photoshop and digital input devices like graphic tablets were making big advances. Watercolor kind of fell by the wayside for me for a while until I started picking it back up again, mainly for portraits. And I would do some landscapes, but usually not barns. Yeah, so I got this little shed here, and it's typically, sometimes if they were raised off the ground, they would put these little rock columns for the foundation. Yeah, so I mean, basically, I invented these buildings just based on structure ideas, building block ideas that I have seen in photos, you know, online searches, my own experience having seen these things and you know, backcountry drives. So let me take a minute to just give you some ideas and show you the kind of things you can look at and what makes this kind of what I call a very forgiving subject real easy to put in your landscapes, or even just to do as a featured painting or illustration and invent your own. Yeah, so I ran across this book maybe 3 years ago, and this was just a selection of photographs, and there's also songs and poems in here of the very kind of thing that I'm painting. And it just got me to thinking, and I didn't really do much with the idea then, of just taking some of these ideas and using them as building blocks to invent your own kind of little rustic structures. I'll show you what I'm talking about. This book is chock full of all sorts of things, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things. This is a great example. You get ideas from foundation, the way planks are laid, the way the underlying beams are used to support the roof. And then you get all these ideas for basically how to make the structure look dilapidated. And that's actually pretty square and true compared to some of them I've seen where portions of the roof are collapsing. I mean, here's a great example. You can literally make these things look as bad as you want to make them look, if you know what I mean. Here again, just the way the foundations are. Look at the disheveled parts, like where the boards are falling out, or how, see that, it's hard to see, but that door there is not square. How the tin roof is laid, the scale of the boards, and that can vary greatly. But here you have some wide planks and you have some narrow ones. The beams are showing. Light effects, like how the shadows are created by the sun. Here's some more. And again, I'm not really looking at that as a structure to paint overall, but looking at the details. Edge boards on these things. Again, this is a good example for the scale of those boards. The tin roof, just kind of patched over boards. Here's shuttered up windows. These give you sort of a building block box of ideas that you can pull from to invent your own. There's maybe a little pump house or outhouse. Great ideas for, how to treat little details. But those structural ideas, again, this one here is full of structural ideas. If there's a piece of tin roof that's blown off, what does it look like underneath? It's not just a hole. It's interesting how we have these shingle outer edges and then we have diagonal boards. It's a good look at what the foundations are like. Just a lot of great ideas. Okay, let me show you another book. This kind of is what started, both of these books actually, what started my doodle, which is now turning into a little study. This is a book from the late 60s. I think it was published in the late 60s. Books like this, I think kind of fed the craze. But this, Eric Sloan, this is sort of a historical look at barns. Really nice pen and ink illustrations. There's some paintings in here too. Now most of the barns here are not like we get in the South. These are really nice barns, a lot of these. These are from the Northeast, where you get the big ones, the big stone ones. I'm sure up in the Northeast they have dilapidated versions of these too, but typically these barns in the Northeast were works of art. Some of them were really well built. He's got some paintings. You can still get this book, by the way, used if you can find a decent one. An Age of Barns by Eric Sloan. But here again, what I liked about this book was just looking at the structure, the way planks were laid, little things like fences, stone textures. It's just good reference. Here he's showing this barn over the years, 1800, 1780, 1850, 1840, where a barn may have been added to. I see the sagging roof. I did a number of paintings. I wish I could show you some of my old paintings, but most of them I don't have anymore. They're in people's houses. I gave them away. I tended to paint these little structures, like these small out structures, whether they be corn cribs or chicken coops or spring houses, or smoke houses, like that. Now these log structures, you get a lot of ideas. Up where my wife is from, I've seen some of this kind of thing on the barns. When we're traveling through Iowa to visit my wife's folks, you'll see some of this kind of thing. Not really the stone ones so much, but some really cool barns. The barns down here in the South are really not much to look at. You tend to find more hastily thrown together ones, I guess. Farmers down, especially in the Appalachian area, were pretty poor, at least back in the day. And again, back to my point, some of these buildings are very inventable. You don't necessarily have to, ooh, this book's falling apart, to get it rebound. You don't necessarily have to be going out and getting pictures of some historical structure. You can, but this gives you lots of ideas. Anyway, so those two books impetus behind me doing this and wanting to do this, and just kind of reviving interest I used to have. It's fun to revisit, and those kind of references, they just help you add some little details to make sense out of some of this. Alright, we're coming along. I'm nearly finished here. I don't have this on camera, but I went back and added a slightly deeper wash here. I thought it would make a nice contrast against this white or very light roof. I made a mistake. I'm on a very heavy incline here, and I do that mostly for camera purposes. Also neck issues. I don't have a good time looking down on my artwork. But sometimes it presents problems with watercolor, and some of my color bled a little bit into the roof. A lot of you have said you appreciate when I point out mistakes and what I do to correct them. And I agree. I think that's very useful. All I'm doing is I'm just brushing a little bit of, you can use gouache. I'm using a Zig White Ink 30. It's like a gouache. It's a water-soluble white ink that's just highly opaque. But you can use it like gouache. I don't like to put it in thick. What I do is just kind of layer it in glazes so that it soaks into the paper. One of the things you have to be concerned about when you make a correction with gouache or acrylic or whatever is the whiteness of it usually stands out because, especially in this case, this paper is not white. It's a natural color. So I may end up having to go back over it with a wash that's just slightly tinted. But so far, I mean, it's blending pretty well. Now, if you've watched my channel long and heard my comments, you know I don't mind using white, period. I'm not a purist, in other words. The only objection I ever have, I like it to either be seamless or look intentional. If that makes any sense to you at all. So I think it dovetails here real well. I just want to add a little bit of soft something, I don't know, and carry this down into here a little bit. A couple very slight pops of green. And I like, just compositionally, I like pulling that down there. All right, now, for the purposes of this video, I think I am really done. Hope you enjoyed that. I'm pretty happy with it, especially for something that just started out as a doodle. For you patrons, this all kind of evolved out of a Draw Anything session, and you know what that is if you're with me on Patreon and watching the 15-Minute Artists series. Draw Anything sessions can a lot of times turn into something very substantial. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, patrons, for your generous support. See everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.